And okay, and so as I said, the coursework one and the actual requirements are on the page where supposed to submit the work. So that's this one here, and it says coursework one Tableau 20%. So you probably will see the due date and says and 13th of November. So that's the older one. But if you actually go to the page, and you should see the correct dates there, and which should be, let me think, should be next Friday, and which will be the, oops, and doesn't really help. Let me see my calendar. So next Friday will be the 5th of March, and that will be and due on 5 o'clock, 5th of March. Obviously here, and because I'm not part of the January start students, so it doesn't really show me the dates there. Can someone confirm that you can see the submission deadline is next Friday, 5 o'clock?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, Professor.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's good. So all you need are in these two files, and the PDF file is a requirement, and the spreadsheet is the dataset. So we're gonna have a look at the PDF file first. I think I already have that in downloaded. Let's see, and save. Oh, I didn't. Okay, and hopefully the text is big enough. And so overall, the requirements for this coursework is very similar to the group work we did, but the difference will be we're using a different data set, so the analysis questions will be different. And also this is actually worth much more marks, so that's 25% compared to the group work, which is the 5%. Okay, and for the data set, and we're gonna using this data set, don't worry about the name. And it's a data set on the, it give you information on three and measurements, which is all health related. And the first one is the body mass index or BMI. And the second one is the percentage of the people with diabetes. And the final one is the percentage of people and with high blood pressure. Okay, and then, so maybe let's have a look at the data set first, and before we come back to the more about the requirements. And so the dataset is just this file here on the same submission page, and you download it. Hey, like, and okay, and so first thing is just be aware, and there are three sheets in this spreadsheet, and not just one. So you need to use, probably need to use all three for the coursework, and so it's useful to know there are three. So if you can see, and the first one, give me a second. And is the text big enough to see?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, and so the first is about raised blood pressure. And so what it shows is they call the prevalence of the raised blood pressure. Essentially just means percentage. Yeah, and the second sheet is about BMI, which is the body mass index. And in that one, and it only shows you the prevalence of BMI greater than 30 kilometers per meter. So that's the medical standard for obesity. Then it shows the percentage. Or here, it's actually not the percentage. It's not say it's 0.00207%. It's actually should be 0.2%. So this is like the decimal value instead of percentage. And then the final one is about the diabetes. Again, its prevalence. So that's the actual value needs to be converted into percentage or just leave as it is. Okay, and in terms of format, it's similar. So it shows for a country, for a given gender, and for a given year, the percentage of the population in this case have raised blood pressure. So it says in Afghanistan for men in year 1975, and they're about 25% or 0.25 of the overall total. 25% of the total population have raised blood pressure, which is quite high percentage. And then the data keep going all the way to, in this case, to 2015. And then we move on to a next country. Again, for men, it's from 1975 all the way to 2015. We missed that part already. Yeah, 2015, which finishes here. And then next country. And then later on, you will see the same values for women. And so let me just searching for women. Ah, couldn't find women. I'm pretty sure there's woman. Okay, why it says couldn't find? Okay, now I find weird. And okay, I think let's go back to the very top. Just find women again. Okay, and so here, as you can see highlighted on my screen, here now it starts with the values for women. And again, so they are ordered by the country. So country is ordered by alphabetically. So Afghanistan is the first country. And for the women, and in that particular year, that's the prevalence of the people with raised blood pressure. And then it goes on after Afghanistan is Albania, etc., from 1975 and to 2015. And then move on to the next country and so on and so forth. Okay, and so this sheet is about the raised blood pressure, and the next one is about BMI, and the format is the same. So the first column is the country, and then the gender, and then the year of the measurement, and finally the measurement. And it just say the measurement itself is different this time, and it's the prevalence of the BMI, or say just treated as a percentage of the population that is overweight or obese. That's what the obesity means. And the rest, the format is exact same. So okay, so for example, here it's slightly different in the sense, and in the first sheet, for men, we only have the value up to 2015 in terms of blood pressure level, and raise the blood pressure percentage, whereas here it is slightly longer and it has to 1 more year for the men. And again, same for the next countries, also 1 more year. That will be the only difference between these two. And finally, the last sheet and is also about the format. Again, is exactly the same. You have the first column, which is country. Second is the gender. The third is the year. Okay, and finally, and the prevalence. The prevalence, and again, this time it's the prevalence for the percentage or the prevalence for the diabetes. say what percentage or how much of the population has diabetes. In terms of format, it's the same. Again, time-wise will be slightly different. So, and it seems to be starting from the 1980 instead of 1975 before, and this is the previous ones. And this is starting from 1975, and this is starting from 1975 as well. So just because the data is not available, and before that, so it's starting from 1980, and then go all the way to 2014, so slightly shorter. And then the same for the next country, and so on and so forth. Yeah, it's also to 2014. So the structure between these three measurements are exactly the same, and the only difference is the starting and the year varies a little bit, depends on the availability of the data. Okay, and is there any question? Is there any question about the data set? Okay, and so I assume there's no.
No,
And
Professor.
okay, and
Professor?
then yeah,
Hello. Professor, when we do an analysis in Tableau, we basically have to feed all three data sets in the data source.
and you will need to use all of them for the coursework, and it probably will be treated just as one data set, and in Tableau it might be able to recognize and it's into 3 sheets, which and we tried before, and you can then join them together, and we'll come to that and in a second. In terms and data processing. Okay, let's get back to the requirements. And so we covered the data set, and so it has these 3 sheets for the body BMI, diabetes, and blood pressure. Okay, and then in terms of actual the coursework itself, and as I mentioned, it's quite similar to the group work that we did before, but the goals are different because the data set is different. Okay, and so instead of one, you now have 2 tasks, and the first one is to find a pattern for one of the measurements. So we mentioned there are 3, the BMI, diabetes, and blood pressure. You can pick any one of those. And then in terms of the pattern, you can see it's either change over time, the kind of pattern over time, or across different countries or regions. So this is about the time, so how the value changes over time. This is about how the values change across different and part of the world. So you can either look at the country level. I don't think it give you the information about, say, continent. Yeah, so that's something information you have to add yourself if you want to. Okay, and the second one is to find a relationship between 2 or 3 measurements. Okay, so and the first question is looking at only one measurement. Then the second one question or analysis task is about more than one to look at the relationship between the measurements. And so, for example, and you can look at the, say, the relationship between BMI and diabetes, or diabetes with blood pressure, or all straight together. It's up to you. And again, and the relationship, for example, are they correlated? Say, does increased BMI leads to higher diabetes rate and high blood pressure, for example. And again, the pattern will be either over time, so how do they change over time, or across different areas. Okay, and so if you have any questions, and just let me know. Don't wait till the end, and just raise your hand or just jump in. That's fine. Okay, and so that's analysis task. Okay, and then in terms of submission, so we want you to submit one package, the Tableau workbook, and package means and the Tableau workbook itself would including the data in that already. And then the workbook should including all the visualizations you created and the source data set, because it's packaged, it will include the source file. Okay, and then a separate report. You can use a Word file or maybe use PowerPoint or a PDF. It's entirely up to you. And to addressing the marking criteria, which are the ones listed below. Okay, and so basically you need to submit 2 files, and one is the Tableau file, which with the visualization and the data in it, and then a document which address the requirements here. I think you probably need to put everything in one zip file. If I let me change my role to a student. Add a submission. Yeah, okay. And so it only allows zip file, so you need to put the Tableau file and the document into a one zip and submit here. And you have the maximum file size is 10 megabytes. So try, and then you only allow one zip file. So that's why I have to put all the files or both files in zip, and to make sure it's no more than 10 megabytes. Otherwise, it would not allow you to submit. And if you had issues, please contact me and at least a day before. For example, for some reason you couldn't get your files reduced to smaller than 10 megabytes. Okay, and that's the submission. So next part is the actual requirements. Okay, and it says, so you have 2 analysis tasks. So you need to create 2 visualizations and in Tableau, and so one for the single measurement pattern. So that's the first one here, and then another one. The second visualization is for the multi-measurement pattern or the analysis 2. So each one should have one visualization. Okay, and then each of these visualizations can be a worksheet, in the sense you only have one chart in that visualization, and a dashboard. That means you might have multiple visualizations, or a story. So still you have multiple visualizations, but for a story, they are not shown together, and it's shown in sequence. Yeah. And then, okay, these need to be named as finding 1 and finding 2, so I can easily identify them. So for example, you might have multiple visualizations and in your Tableau workbook. For example, if you want a dashboard, you have to create the individual visualizations first and before add them to a dashboard. So I need you to tell me which one is the 2 findings. Yeah, if there's more than 2, or even just 2, I still need you to tell me which one is a finding 1 and which one is finding 2. So let's and maybe run Tableau quickly here. So I can show you the in terms of naming. Okay, and let's just open an existing one that comes with the Tableau. Okay, and so in this example, and it might be slightly small, but hopefully you can still see the text. And you have these different, actually there's already pre-created dashboard. Okay, and in this case, there's multiple ones. This is not a dashboard, it's just a normal visualization and try to load data. And what I'm asking you to do here why it's not showing. And this one here, in terms of name as finding one and finding two. And let's say in Tableau, and this is your first finding, and you need to name this by rename the sheet and just call it finding one. Yeah, so I know this is your finding one, and then maybe let's say this is your second finding. So in this case, it's a dashboard. And we're gonna just rename this one and finding two. Yeah. And so in this case, then I know which one is your answer, just to make sure it's clear.
Professor,
Yeah.
what if like for similar same question we have more than one visualization? So what are we supposed to do?
Okay. And so the question is, okay, so I assume you mean, for example, for finding one, you have two or three validations.
Exactly.
And one thing you could do is you can create a dashboard, which
Mm-hmm.
including all these three, or if you prefer to show all three in its own worksheet, maybe you have to just name all those three sheets with finding one, or maybe
Perfect.
finding one A, finding one B, or finding one C. Then I know, and these are three are all for finding one, and in the order they meant to show. Or create a story, maybe easier if you don't want to them to be shown all together at the same time.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
So, Professor, suppose we are creating a dashboard with multiple findings, and later we name that each dashboard as finding one and finding two, and later we create a story for that, and we can still use it like that, right? We can have a story and still have two separate sheets having finding one and finding two, dashboards having finding one and finding two.
I would say there should be ideally, only one thing which is named the finding one. So it really depends. If you decided, because I only asked you to present one patterns, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually it should be enough in captured in one dashboard or one visualization.
Mm-hmm.
So just decide whether you want to use a dashboard visualization or even a story, and ideally it has only one finding one and not have multiple ones. For example, in this case, and this is a dashboard, and the step finding two is a dashboard. It has multiple validations in it. For these validations itself, we don't need to name them again, finding two. So we can see finding two is made up of the product view and product details, and these are somewhere hidden. And you don't have these are separate views. You don't have to name these again as finding two, and just name the dashboard itself as finding two.
Thank you, Professor. Got it.
Yeah. And okay, and then say the findings and to be of different type. I don't think this is that relevant, and it's only matters. For example, if you want to present more than one findings for each question, for example, for the single measurement, you want to present more than one patterns. It says then these two are the findings of the same type. And so says the same one is the obesity level in the UK increased from 2000 to 2010. And then the percentage of population with raised blood pressure decreased from 2000 to 2010. These are more or less the same thing. But if you only and showing one findings for each of the questions, then that should not be an issue. And also, this does not apply between the single measurement and multi-measurement findings. They all definitely be of different type. Okay.
Professor,
Yeah.
Professor, about the report, in the report, do we have to mention in the report the description of our findings, or like we have in the report we have to mention the what, why, and how part?
Yes, and that's we're gonna come to now, and in terms of actual marking scheme. And before we do that, I just want to add one more thing is in the Tableau you can use annotation and to highlight a certain part if that is what you want to say is your main findings. And so I will show you quickly, and let's say this is your finding and there's lots of information here, but maybe you want to say your finding is about maybe this particular part, and you can add annotation to this value here so I can know that is what you want to focus on. And you can just, in this case, you can say right click, say annotate, and I either mark point or area, and depends on what you need to do. And you can write the text. Say this is the finding. Okay, the actual text will depends on what your finding is. And it will take a little bit time to generate. Okay, then you have a little bit text, and in the validation, which actually highlights what you want me to look at in terms of validation, if that makes sense. That's weird. And the validation here is not. It's maybe just a bit slow. Okay, and so this is what the annotation is. So for a validation with many things, and you can use the annotation to highlight the part and which is relevant to your finding. Okay, and that's in terms of the requirements. And now we're actually coming to the marking scheme, as I mentioned, and the marking scheme is quite similar and to the group work. And so you need to write about these in the report. So earlier we mentioned you need to submit two files. One is a Tableau workbook, and the other one is a separate report document. So, and in the report document, and you need to address these. And so that has four parts. And the first one is the finding, what the finding is, and then the what and why and how. Okay, and so for the finding in the report, all you need to do is just to say what the finding is, and you need to reference this to the validation. You can either just refer to the validation in the Tableau workbook, or you can including a screenshot of the validation in the report. It's up to you, either way, but make it clear which which validation it's referring to. And then in terms of the marking, and so this is just same as before. So if you have to make sure the finding is correct, and if it's not correct, then you will not get marked. And then if it's correct, it depends on how insightful that finding is. As we mentioned before, if it's a trivial finding, you will not get very high marks. Some marks, a good finding is something interesting and insightful, and you get 2 marks. Okay, and then you need to talk about the what, and in terms of the data set type, data type, and attribute type. And for the attribute type, really, you need to talk about the attributes and used in the validation. You don't have to talk about every single attribute in the dataset, but only the ones that you used in the validation and what their types are. And with some justification why that's the case. And then similarly, and for the why part, and you need to talk about both the action and target, and then under action you have analysis, search, and the query. So this is the same as you did in the group work, but in this case you have to do it yourself and with a little bit and justification. So why, for example, in under the analyze, why is discover or consumption, etc., etc. and why certain type of searches. Okay, and then finally we comes to the how part. So the how you first describe and the visual mapping or encoding. So that says, and what are the marks? Do you use point, line, or shape to represent, or area to represent each items in the data? In this case, maybe a country. And then the second one, what are the channels and used to map? For example, and in your case, maybe say the BMI value is mapped to size, or blood pressure value is mapped to size, etc., etc. Okay, and then discuss anything if you used any filtering or dashboard and or sorting, etc., and describe it here. So this part is describing the visual mapping, what that is, and the next one is to justify why they are effective. And so first one is say, how does the types of visualization you choose fit for the finding? And so why the bar chart, or if you choose the bar chart or line chart or scat plot or some other charts available in the Tableau, why that's the right type for the finding? Depends on what your finding is and what you need to show. And then why is the visual mapping or encoding effective? So basically, you might choose, say, the position or size or color to represent some values, and why that's the best choice. Okay, and finally, and talk about any features you use, and including filtering. So you filtered out something, and how is that helping with the visual design? Maybe do some sorting or mouse over, etc. And if you design a dashboard, why a dashboard is useful. Okay, and so this is then, so basically these are the marks for one finding. So you have 2, 2, 2, and 4, which add up to 10. Then in total you have 2 findings, and make up in total 20 marks. And okay, and that's everything in terms of the requirements. And is there any question regarding the requirements?
Can you please repeat, sir? Due to this
And
internet connection, I couldn't connect properly.
okay, and okay, so sorry about the connection problem, but I don't think I can repeat everything in the entire requirement. So uh, this part is recorded, so you'll be able to watch it afterwards. I'll put it online so you can watch the recording afterwards.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is there any other question regarding the requirements? We just talked about the marking scheme.
Yeah. Please, can you please give us an example of a unique finding? Just what you regard as a unique finding.
Sorry, and you are quite quiet. I couldn't quite hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I said, can you give us an example of a unique finding, what you consider as a unique finding? Just an example.
Okay, and so in terms of unique finding, you don't have to worry too much about, and because here I'm only asking you for one finding for each of these questions, and so long as it's only one finding, it will be unique. It only becomes the issue if you're presenting more than one finding for each an analysis question, which is not required, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes, that does. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, and is there any other question? Okay.
Sorry, sir. Can you give an example of what part, please?
Sorry, the example of what?
If you go to the what part, please.
The what part? Okay. And so for this one, you just need to set what is the data set type, what is the data type, and what is the attribute type. And so you need to look at the data set to decide. So for the data set type, we have tables, I can't remember now, network or map, etc. You have to pick one, which one of those. And then again, in the book or the lecture, we cover different data types. You have to pick one of those from the list. And finally, the same for the attribute type.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, and so I will stop the recording.